What is going on, everyone? Happy Friday. Welcome in to another edition of GC Live. Guys, we are officially nearing the end of a long, busy off season. The countdown is nearing an end. We are 7 days away, 1 week, 7 days, and a little bit time and change from opening day at Founders Park as South Carolina baseball begins the 2025 season. We're looking forward to it. We are going to start doing a special edition of GC Live focused around baseball every single week, once a week. We'll start doing it probably on Thursdays, usually the day before a weekend series begins. Sometimes it'll be Thursday. Other cases, it'll probably be Wednesday because sometimes there will be SEC series in specific that will be starting on Thursdays and going till Saturday. But guys, I'm excited. I'm pumped. This is usually my favorite time of the year. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be hopefully a very fun season. It's a new era in South Carolina baseball with Paul Maneri now being the next head coach for the Gamecocks after the previous staff, Mark Kingston and company, were let go after last season. And I think everyone's excited. There's a new energy in the air, and I'm really looking forward to what this season brings when things get started next Friday, Valentine's Day, February 14th at Founders Park. So if you're looking for something to do, need to get your girlfriend or boyfriend going on a date, or husband, wife, whatever, on a date for Valentine's Day, there's no better place to be than Founders Park for opening day. So we're going to go ahead and start breaking down what this season could look like for the Gamecocks, some of the preseason rankings and polls that have come out, look a little bit into the season. And then once we get into that, we'll dive into, starting next week, we'll dive into just season preview, predictions, possibly just thoughts in general as opening day approaches. But for now, let me start you guys off with our main sponsor of the day, Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. If you're in the market to buy a home or you need help with your mortgage, but you don't know exactly where to begin, Clint is your guy to call. He's been in the mortgage industry for more than 20 years, so he knows what he's doing. He's also a lifelong Gamecock fan and a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central. So if you're watching live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you're watching, you'll see all his information right above me on screen here on GC Live. But if you're listening on podcast, wherever you get your podcast from, the number to call for Clint is 803-422-6797. The NMLS number for him is 71597. Or you can go to ClintHammond.com. And guys, also be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Gamecock Central. If you're watching on YouTube, it takes 5 seconds to go ahead and click off this stream. Hit the subscribe button. Also, hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying what you're listening to. And then you can continue to watch. And you can also go ahead and follow us on all of our social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Gamecock Central. Or you can also go ahead and subscribe to our website, GamecockCentral.com. That's where you'll get all the great baseball information, like the baseball notebook, game recaps, all that sort of features, you name it. We've got it on GamecockCentral.com. I've also got a great story on next Friday's opening day starter, Dylan Eskew. Got a great story coming out on him later this afternoon. So definitely be sure you guys check that out on GamecockCentral.com, because that is where you'll be able to find it. All right. And there's a lot of excitement in the air, like I was saying. And it's just, it feels like a new time in Gamecock baseball, which of course it is, with Paul Maneri now the head coach, new players coming in. I mean, this is going to be a different looking team compared to what we've seen. Obviously, you have the familiar faces from years past, with Ethan Petrie, the team's leading returning hitter, coming back for his junior season, which could possibly be his last at South Carolina, as he's got an important decision to make after the 2025 season, with whether he wants to go to the MLB draft or come back for his senior year. But it feels like in all likelihood, he'd probably go to the MLB draft. But we'll see what happens. But you also have other guys returning. Kennedy Jones, a guy that didn't think he was going to be coming back for this season, is back for his senior year. Same with a guy like Dylan Eskew, who, in this story that you'll read later, if you go on to GamecockCentral.com, he had no intentions on coming back to South Carolina. He was set on going pro, hopefully being drafted, or signing a free agent deal with an MLB team at the very worst. But it turns out that didn't happen, and he's back at South Carolina, and now he's going to be the team's Friday night starter. Other guys like Matthew Becker's back as well. He's another guy that could have potentially taken an opportunity to go pro. There are a bunch of guys on this team that are coming back not just to try to get South Carolina back to Omaha. That's the goal every single year that we talk about, is that South Carolina hasn't been to Omaha since 2012. And it's extremely tough to get there. And we'll get into a little bit of the SEC preseason poll and just why it's going to be very tough in this league. But a lot of guys are coming back for that reason. But a lot of guys are also coming back for the fact that they're here to prove that they can play at the next level too. And that's why they're so bought into what Paul Mainieri is going to bring to the table. Again, this is a guy that while he had been out of baseball for the last 3 years, he hasn't coached in a regular season game or postseason game, whatever, since 2021 when he was at LSU. And this is a guy with more than 40 years of coaching experience. So he brings a lot of experience to the table. And he's also just a winner. I mean, he's currently, as the season begins, the active leader in wins amongst college baseball head coaches. And I feel like a lot of people are probably overlooking this South Carolina team going into the 2025 season for the fact that who knows what you're going to expect with Mainieri returning to the dugout. Again, me personally, watching this team since the fall in scrimmages and whatnot, and just getting to talk to Paul, he seems great. Like he seems like he's in a great position to come back and lead a baseball program for not just this year, but multiple years. And that's a good sign because, he's now 67 years old. And one of the concerns when he was initially hired was that what's going to be the case with his age? Like, how much of a concern should that be? But honestly, I can tell you guys straight up, like up front, I don't think it's going to be an issue at all. He seems to be in good spirits, great health, all that. So he just seems happy. That's the main thing that I can sense when I get to talk with Paul and all that sort of stuff. But also, this is a team that we just don't know what they're ultimately going to be. Because again, they have a lot of new faces on this team. They brought in a lot of transfers. You have some, again, I think this team honestly is split up pretty evenly between returning guys and transfers, freshmen, and JUCO guys. You have a lot of different faces on this team compared to last season where, a lot of guys left. And honestly, I don't think, besides the guys who got drafted, the guys who could have come back, like Cole Messina is the main name who could have come back for his senior year, but obviously he decided to turn pro and he's now with the Colorado Rockies organization. He's your main loss. But other than that, you knew you were losing some guys to the pros because they were out of eligibility, number one. But other than that, the guys you lost, I honestly, I don't think any of them were huge factors in what you did last season. And honestly, maybe it's better that you lost some guys because, it allows you to retool your roster and bring in guys like Henry Kazmar, Nathan Hall, Nolan Naraki. All those guys are going to be in your starting lineup this year. That's huge. And there's a bunch of other players that, like KJ Scobie's coming in. He's starting at third base for South Carolina. It's just an exciting time, and it's refreshing, I think, for a lot of people that maybe don't know these names right now, but I think you're really going to grow to enjoy what these guys bring to the table once the regular season does begin. So there's a lot to get into with this team. And again, we're going to break it down as much as we can today, and then we're going to really, really dive into the thick of the schedule and the preview and all that sort of stuff the day before opening day next Thursday. So definitely be sure to stay tuned for that. Got a question here from EXO who asks, who will be our most improved players this year? Would love to see a great season from Jones, LeCroy, and Becker. Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head, EXO. I think all three of those guys are due to have better seasons than they had last year. You look at a guy like Talmadge LeCroy, for instance. We know how he struggled last year. For one, his bat just wasn't there. He didn't really do much at the plate consistently, had a lot of career lows, and In the field, he was your starting third baseman, but he kind of was a liability at third base. Let's call it what it is. His glove really didn't help South Carolina down the stretch with the errors he made. I think back to the SEC tournament against LSU in those two games. If South Carolina doesn't commit multiple errors, many of which were by way of LeCroy, you're probably beating LSU and not losing in the fashion that you did. Both games in which you had the lead late and LSU came from behind to win. So it's that. It's also the regional where there were some key errors made that kind of cost you as well. But more so, it's like you think back to that SEC tournament. And I mean, I was watching randomly, I just decided I was on YouTube and I was watching highlights from it the other day. And I'm like, how did this team, specifically that semifinal game, how do you blow an 8-0 lead in the fourth? Like, I know it's the fourth inning, but like you watch that game back and some of the errors that were made in that game, it's just like it cost you big time. And that's a thing that I think is going to be so much different this year. Before getting back to the players here that I think will be improved. I think the defense in general, while it hasn't been perfect in the preseason, they have made some errors, no doubt about it. But I think they're going to be so much better defensively this season. Like I was looking it up the other day for a story. South Carolina fielded 971 last year, percentage-wise. I mean, that's not good compared to the rest of the SEC because that was second to last in the conference. And then you look at them making the second most errors in the league last year. That's not good. You know, for as much as South Carolina boasted about being a good defensive team last year, they really weren't, honestly. Like, quite literally just made too many errors, were very sloppy in the field. And it led to them kind of having the season that they did, which they went 37-25 last year and got knocked out in the regional round of the NCAA tournament, which is not good enough around here, obviously. And that's why we've seen so many changes be made. But I think Talmadge is going to have a better year. He has been a guy that I think has hit very well. He's been consistent at the plate since the fall began, and it's kind of carried over here into the preseason. I mean, he's one of the team's better hitters right now, and we'll see what he does this weekend in scrimmage action, which, by the way, South Carolina scrimmages Friday, Saturday, and then Monday, and then the season begins next Friday. And then he's your starting catcher too. I mean, Paul Maneri was saying the other day that he's going to be catching ideally he's going to be catching 2 games a weekend, and then the backup position for the catcher role is still being determined between Ryan Bakes and Max Coffer. I think you could throw Gavin Braylon into the mix, but I don't think he's going to be in that competition just yet, though I think he could play other positions, but that's not the point. The point is that Talmadge is your starting catcher, and I think that's a good role for him because, again, he came to Carolina as a catcher, as a freshman, caught his first year, sat behind guys like Messina and Colin Burgess, and now you're seeing Talmadge kind of full circle, honestly, become that catcher for South Carolina, and we'll see how he does. But I think it's going to allow not just for better defenders to be in the infield, but it's going to help Talmadge because I think he's doing a pretty good job behind the plate. It obviously hasn't been perfect by any means, but I think he's been working on this since the summer. So he's had almost an entire calendar year, a little bit under, honestly, to kind of get ready for this moment. So I think he's going to do well in this role, and then we'll see who ends up winning the backup duties at catcher. Other guys, I mean, Kennedy Jones is another guy that, EXO brought up that I was going to bring up too, as a guy that I think is due for a really solid season. You look at his numbers from last year, they were fine. He hit almost 300, 9 homers, I think about like almost 50 RBIs. He's a guy that at times was one of South Carolina's best hitters. There are a lot of multi-hit games he had, but the thing was, he just wasn't the power bat, the explosive bat that he was at UNC Greensboro when he was there for 2 years before transferring to South Carolina last season. But the thing with that is you're facing SoCon pitching, which is not near the same as the SEC. So I think that's something that when a guy's hitting, almost 350 lifetime at UNCG, hitting double-digit homers every year, his hits are way up. I mean, last year he just didn't have the same type of production. And so I think while he was fine last year, you were expecting so much more. And I think that's why I feel so good about him being a lot better, a lot more akin to what he was before he came to Carolina. And it's going to help now that he's been a year into the SEC. He's faced this type of pitching before, and I think he's going to do some real damage this season, most likely in the cleanup spot behind Ethan Petry in the lineup, which is just about as good of a protection that you can have for your leading hitter, considering Messina's not back this year. So I feel good about Kennedy going into this year. And I think this is kind of like a prove it year for him that he didn't get drafted again. Monty Lee thought he was going to get drafted. And that's why when you see like the story I posted on Kennedy about a week and a half ago on GamecockCentral.com, which I suggest checking out, Paul Mainieri was not planning on having Kennedy back for this season initially. And that's because, Monty had told him that, Kennedy's going to get drafted and stuff. So don't really worry about him. And then he ends up coming back to South Carolina. And here we are now to where he's been there's a bunch of guys that honestly are hitting very consistently, like Talmadge and Nathan Hall, guys like that, Petry. But Kennedy Jones, I'd be like, keep an eye out on him to have a great season because I think he's really going to put up some good numbers this year and honestly be one of South Carolina's better hitters. And then there's Matthew Becker, another guy that came back that I alluded to earlier. I mean, he has had a bit of a career. Like he started out so strong pitching, a one-run outing of 6 innings against Texas, number 1 Texas at the time, in his first career college start. And then he pitches well against Tennessee, and then he's kind of bounced between being a starter. Heck, he's even started games in the NCAA tournament 2 seasons ago for South Carolina. He's been a reliever, a long reliever, a midweek starter. He's even closed games. So he's pitched in just about every role for South Carolina. And coming into this year, the thought was that with Mainieri saying that he's going to be like more of a hybrid guy, maybe he's a guy that bounces around again. But he's had such a good fall and preseason to where he's earned this weekend spot as your number 2 guy in the rotation. And we'll see if he holds on to it. Same deal with Eskew here. We'll see if the rotation stays this way throughout the season. But I think Matthew is a guy that has earned the opportunity to show what he can do as a starter. He likes to start games more than anything else. And I think he's going to do some really good stuff this year. Again, his pitches have been really nice this year. Again, that off speed, the breaking ball he throws. I mean, it's so hard to hit. And he's been pitching very well. I would assume he's going to pitch. I would assume him and Eskew would probably throw today, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe he'll throw tomorrow. But I would bet Eskew pitches today. We haven't gotten word on who's pitching when today in the scrimmage. But definitely these guys are going to be throwing all weekend. And then you got to figure out the 3 spot in your rotation. That's the other thing, because right now it's listed as TBA going into next week, according to Mainieri. But that will be something probably decided this weekend because Eli Jersenbeck and Jake McCoy are the guys that Mainieri considered to be front runners in the rotation, vying for those spots going into the preseason. But Jers has been hit around a little bit, and so is McCoy. So those guys have a lot to prove this weekend. But maybe some of these other guys that you're like your JUCO guys, maybe even your freshmen that I think have been very good so far this preseason, can potentially slide into one of those weekend spots. But honestly, I do think it'll either be McCoy or Jers in that Sunday spot in the rotation. And then the other guy probably starts out the year in a midweek role, which isn't a bad thing. Again, what the rotation and your entire team looks like now may change by the time you get to SEC play. By then, a lot will happen to where guys are going to perform well, other guys won't, and you'll see changes made. But for right now, I think South Carolina has made probably the better decisions with what the team looks like going into the year. Again, Eskew, your Friday starter, Becker, your Saturday starter, and then we'll see who's that Sunday starter. But I'm led to believe it's either going to be Jersenbeck, McCoy, maybe someone else. But I think those are your 2 main guys in contention for that role. And then other starting spots that we know of right now that are already filled. Again, Lee Croy at catcher. I don't know if we've gotten a official word on it. Mainieri's talked so much over the last few weeks about this team and stuff that it's honestly hard to keep up with at times. But I would say that Petry's probably going to be sliding at first base. Again, he could always play the outfield late in games and stuff, which would allow a guy like Bo Hollins to come in defensively at first base. And Maneri's been very high on his defense, trying to use him as a late game, addition. And then at second base, Nolan Araki's going to be your starter. Shortstop, Henry Kazmar. And then third base, KJ Scobie. That rounds out your infield, and you're feeling pretty good about that. The outfield is still kind of getting figured out. I believe, Nathan Hall is going to be starting in center field. But other than that, what do you do with the other two corner outfield spots? Me personally, I think we could see Kennedy Jones is going to be in the lineup. It's just depending on, is he going to play left field or is he going to DH? And if it were up to me, if I were making the lineup, I'd probably have Kennedy DH, though he is very serviceable in the outfield to where he's not your best defender, but he does a good job out there. It's not like he's done a bad job out there so far in the preseason. I think he got a lot of balls hit to him the other day in Tuesday's scrimmage, and he made a diving catch that was really impressive. So I think I would still have him DH to open up another spot for a bat in the lineup as an outfielder that can definitely give you more defense out there. Maybe a guy like Blake Jackson. I think what we're going to see is I would imagine Dalton Mayshore is your starting right fielder this season. I've been impressed with him. He's a transfer from St. Mary's that is very quick on the base paths, got a good glove in the outfield, and he's also hit very well. I mean, he struggled a bit in the fall, but he's come along nicely so far this preseason. And even a guy like Evan Stone, a long-time South Carolina guy here, local product right here out of Dutch Fork. I mean, that's another guy that had been struggling to start the preseason, but again, he's picked it up lately to where it is going to be interesting to see who gets those other starting outfield spots. And if Kennedy's your left fielder, I got asked about this on Jack's mailbag, which is up on Gamecock Central now. But I mean, what happens if Kennedy is playing the outfield? Who do you have at DH? And I think me personally, I don't think there's one particular guy you're going to have as your DH if Kennedy's out in the outfield. I think it's kind of just a spot that can kind of be a rotational piece to where you want to give Ethan Petrie a day off or a half day off, I guess, and have him just hit, put him at DH. You want to give any other guy, Talmadge Lecroy, a day off when he's not catching, put him at DH. I think it's going to be that type of spot if Kennedy is out in the outfield. But me personally, like I said, I think I'd put Kennedy at DH, let another guy play the outfield that is a good defender. Like Evan Stone's a great outfielder. And if his bat continues to stay the way it's been on course, it's going to be hard to leave him out of the lineup. So I think you feel pretty good about where things are at right now. A lot of new guys in this lineup. And the thing that a lot of people ask me about, what is the approach going to look like this year? Are they going to be more home run heavy? Are they going to strike out a ton? What is going to be the deal this season? And what I've kind of come down to just from watching this team for months now, honestly, at this point, I think they're going to be a more contact-oriented team. I think they're going to put the ball in play. Yes, they're still going to hit home runs. I think they're going to have guys like Petrie, Jones, maybe others like maybe Dalton Mayshore or someone else is another guy that ends up hitting about 10 homers or more. You might have a few guys in that double-digit category. But overall, I think this is a team that maybe plays gap to gap, hits a lot of balls in play, singles, doubles, triples, whatever you may have it, and then gets on base and moves runners over and scores runs. Small ball, if you will, honestly, is what I'm trying to get at. I think that's what we're going to see this year, and that's a good thing because I know a lot of people over the years have kind of been critical of South Carolina for being so home run happy, and it's not a bad thing, but when you're in situations where you have a runner at third and there's 2 outs and you need a hit, not necessarily a home run in like a one-run game or a tie game. You just need to put the ball in play. And that's actually not a good example, but it's like a runner at third with like 1 out and you just need to put the ball in play and you end up striking out or doing something else that's not good enough for the team. It helps when you have guys like Kazmar, Hall, Naraki, players like that I think are going to hit homers this year, but they're also going to get on base and do the little things to drive and run. So I'm feeling pretty good about where this lineup is at. And got a question here from Dustin Baxter who asks, thoughts on Bo Hollins? I think with Bo, we haven't seen him hit a lot during the preseason here. And shout out Bo Hollins, fellow Buffalo Bills fan. And shout out to my guy Josh Allen for winning the NFL MVP last night, which was definitely a big surprise considering Lamar Jackson probably should have won MVP. But that's besides the point. Bo, I think, is a guy that Maneri spoke. I actually asked Maneri about some of the freshmen this year and what we can expect from those guys. He brought up KJ Scobie as a guy that's going to start at third this year. But then he brought up Bo Hollins as a guy that maybe won't start at the beginning of the season, but he's a guy that he wants to use as a late game replacement in the field, or maybe you move Petrie to right field or whatever, and then you put Bo at first base because he's a much better defender than Petrie is, obviously, considering he wants to use him late in games and stuff. And then Bo's also a switch hitter, so we haven't seen him hit a lot so far this preseason. He did hit regularly in the fall. I know he did struggle a little bit, but I think he's a guy that eventually, maybe not necessarily this year, but over time, he's going to be a guy that is a regular in this lineup. And it's such an important thing to have a good first baseman, defensively speaking, but a guy that's a switch hitter too. I'm very interested to see how that works out for him because I think he's going to be an integral piece of what South Carolina is trying to accomplish over the next few years. So that's about where the team is at right now. And you guys can go ahead and drop any questions that you have on certain players or certain things you guys want to talk about with this team. Again, we're going to keep this going for a bit here. But let's dive a little bit into the outlook that a lot of other places, a lot of other sites have for the South Carolina team. Because again, it feels like many people are kind of sleeping on South Carolina this year. And maybe they're right. I don't know. Maybe it's just because they haven't seen South Carolina like we have watching this team day in and day out in scrimmages and stuff. But getting to the point here, I mean, the Gamecocks aren't going to be ranked going to the season. D1 baseball, perfect game. Baseball America, not ranked. And then with the SEC preseason poll that came out the other day, the 16 head coaches voted South Carolina to finish 14th in the SEC. And that means Texas A&M is the favorite to win the SEC title this year. And South Carolina is only projected ahead of Ole Miss and Missouri, which I think Carolina is just a lot better than those teams. But I think there's a reason why they're probably on the back end of the totem pole in this conference when you look at the rankings and stuff. And EXO brings up the question, why isn't South Carolina ranked? There's a few reasons. And I brought this one up before, but there's just a lot of unknowns right now. Like, how is Paul Maneri going to do in his return to college baseball? That's number one. I think he's going to do fine. And I think he's got an excellent coaching staff around him. Again, I'm high on Terry Rooney, Monty Lee, and John Hendry, and guys like that are a part of this coaching staff. They're going to definitely help out Maneri because it's not a one-man job. It's definitely an entire team effort to get this thing rolling. But then I think also the other questions are, who else is going to hit besides Ethan Petrie in this lineup? We're expecting Kennedy Jones and Talmadge Lucroy and all these guys to have better years. But what if they don't? What happens if they don't? So I think people have questions about that haven't seen South Carolina in action. Because, again, this is voted on by the coaches with the preseason poll and stuff. So it's not like they have had time to see South Carolina since the end of last season. Again, they're worried about their own teams and stuff. So, I mean, they'll do their research, obviously, I would imagine. But at the same time, it's like they're going to pick the teams that are kind of higher up in the rankings and stuff, probably. But then you also have questions about the pitching staff. Like, I mean, me too, honestly. Like, how's your bullpen going to turn out? What are you getting out of your starting pitching? Like Becker, Eskew, maybe even guys like Jerzenbeck and McCoy, with them expected to be used a lot this season. What are you getting out of those guys? The thing with the pitching staff is, and I was speaking to a former player about it this morning, they don't have that top flight guy, the frontline starter, the dominant arm that you can count on giving you 7 shutout innings every game. That's just not what this team is going to have. What they do have, though, and it might actually work out better, is that they have a lot of different pitchers on this team. Honestly, the entire pitching staff in general, for the most part, is pretty good. Like, you can get good outings out of these guys. It's just you don't have that frontline starter just yet. Doesn't mean these guys can't turn into them. Doesn't mean Dylan Eskew can't be your every Friday giving you 6 shutout innings or maybe 1-run ball outing every week. You can get that. So my point is, these guys have potential. It's just they got to unlock it, and they got to get to that next step in their process, which some guys already are. Some guys still have some work to do. So I'll be very interested to see how that kind of all works out. And then the other thing to think about with the whole ranking system here is there's a lot of good teams in the SEC. It's just a simple fact of the matter. You had 4 teams from this conference go to the College World Series last year. you have a lot of teams with really good pedigrees of winning, like LSU, Florida, Tennessee, who just won the national championship last year. Texas A&M is the preseason number one going into the season. Like everyone's high on Texas A&M. Texas is going to be better this year with Jim Schlossnagle. I mean, it's you look at this conference from top to bottom. It's very much, I've said it multiple times now, it's very much like what we're seeing in men's basketball. Now, don't get that twisted. It does not necessarily mean South Carolina is going to have a bad year like men's basketball is having right now and being in dead last in the conference. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that just expect this conference, as it always is, to be at its best. Like every weekend is going to be an absolute grind. But South Carolina is going to have plenty of opportunities to go up against teams like LSU, Arkansas, Tennessee, A&M, Florida, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Ole Miss. Teams like that you're facing every single weekend. You will have your opportunities to prove everyone wrong and show that, yeah, you might have been picked 14th in the SEC to begin the year. And again, it doesn't mean anything, number one. Don't like take it all with a grain of salt, honestly. Don't be too worried about it because it really just doesn't mean anything. It just shows that South Carolina can definitely have a good season here and fly under the radar. But like they're going to have their opportunities against top quality teams in this conference to go out and show that they are who they think they are and what they can be. So it's going to be an interesting season because it could go one of two ways, honestly. Like you could end up getting slacked around in SEC play and just have a bad year. It's possible. Not saying it's not. But if you get the most out of your guys this season, if guys hit well around Petrie, if your pitching staff turns out to be what I think they could be, potentially pretty good this year, with a lot of unknown guys right now that step up and pitch very well, and things work out with Mineri and all that, you can have an Omaha caliber season. It's just I'm not sure exactly what it's going to end up being. More realistically, and this is kind of getting into my predictions, I guess, a little bit. I haven't thought too much about predictions just yet. And again, I'll have more fully fleshed out thoughts by that point next week. But I think if I'm leaning one way right now, I think it's going to be an uphill battle to get to Omaha just because the SEC is so good this season. At least it's what the projections and stuff and players returning, it seems to be that way. It definitely will be. The SEC is the premier conference for college baseball. That's why I think it's going to be tough to get to the College World Series, get through the regionals, the SEC tournament, the season in general, and super regionals. I mean, it's going to be tough to get there. It's not impossible. They could definitely do it. But I think you have your work cut out for you facing top flight competition all season long. And it starts even before SEC play, honestly. Like I know you have 3 of your non-conference weekends are coming against pretty, favorable opponents that you should beat pretty easy. Like you have Sacred Heart next weekend, then you have Milwaukee coming into town, and then you have Morehead State coming into town before conference play picks up on March 15th. However, you also have sandwiched in between there. You cannot forget about these guys because I'm going to be honest. Do not, and you guys might not like me for saying this. Do not be surprised if this team I'm about to talk about gets to Omaha this year. They are very good, whether you like them or hate them. They are very good, and that's the Clemson Tigers. And it's a question that we got here from EXO. Super important question. Are we going to beat the Taters? It's a great question. Clemson's a very good team this year. Make no mistake about it. It's just objectively speaking, they're a good team. And they are going to be a team that potentially runs the table in the ACC. Might be the best team in that conference, in my opinion, and gets to Omaha. Because they nearly got there last year. They hosted a super regional against Florida, got swept, but they were in those games. So it's very much possible that this Clemson team, Eric Bakich returning, Cam Cannarella coming back, a lot of good additions made out of the portal and in recruiting. It's going to be a good team this year. And that's the 3rd weekend of non-conference play. And I think that's the real benchmark point in the season for South Carolina. It tells you very early on, less than a month into the season, where your team is at. Because it all starts Friday, February 28th. You go to Clemson, then you go to Greenville at Fluor Field for the middle game of the series on March 1st, and then you return home to Founders Park to face the Tigers on March 2nd. I mean, look, you may not like to hear it, but that's a good team over there. So South Carolina's got their work cut out for them. If they do beat the Clemson, which I think, to answer the question, I think is very much possible. If you beat that team 2 out of 3 or even sweep them, that's a really good way to look at where your team's at. That shows you that there's progress being made and that this is a team that can go out here and beat the likes of Arkansas, OU, Tennessee, Florida. It sets South Carolina up well if you win that weekend series against Clemson so early on in the year. But again, it's not just one series that makes the difference. It's you got to play 56 games and you got to play well. And Jeff brings this up. I mean, the SEC tournament may be tougher than Omaha. You're absolutely right, because all 16 teams are getting into Hoover this year for the tournament, and it's going to be a grind. Again, it wouldn't shock me. I don't think South Carolina is going to finish 14th in the SEC. I don't think that is going to be the case. I expect them to probably be middle of the pack because this conference is just so good. And South Carolina, I think, it will have a pretty good year. But the SEC is just that tough to where it's going to be a real dogfight. And that tournament in Hoover, I'm looking forward to getting back out to Hoover because it honestly, it's a fun time out there, number one. It's like college baseball heaven out there, honestly, in my opinion, even though some people think Hoover is just not fun or anything because of the past times that South Carolina has been there. But, yeah, I mean, it's going to be an absolute grind this year, a gauntlet to get through the SEC schedule. And we'll see how South Carolina does. Again, every weekend is going to be tough in this conference. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough from that standpoint. But, again, I think it helps that a lot of people are overlooking this team seemingly right now. I think, again, like I said before, I just think that's because you see people that just don't get to watch this team day in and day out. And that's why I say don't take a lot. I mean, take stock in what a coach says if you want, or someone that does the rankings, media member, whoever. But I'm just saying, like, they most likely have not seen this team play since last year. And that's why I think, I'm not saying I'm the right answer here from seeing this team play every day, but I think I can tell you that this team is going to be better than what the rankings say right now. How much better will they be? That's the question, but that's something that's going to be answered over the next few months here, and we'll see how the season turns out. So I think that's going to do it for today on this stream. Again, it's been good getting back into talking baseball again, and I think this is going to be a fun season for South Carolina. We'll have more preview of next weekend series to open the year, what you can expect from Sacred Heart a little bit, get into some of South Carolina and the season ahead, share some of my overall predictions. And yeah, it'll be a lot of fun this season. So again, South Carolina begins the regular season next Friday against Sacred Heart, 4 p.m., Founders Park. Hope to see you guys there. But the day before that, we'll obviously be on GC Live again, talking some baseball on that Thursday. Opening day eve, really looking forward to it. And then we've got scrimmages throughout this weekend leading into next week. Starting today, Friday, 2:30 p.m. at Founders Park. The team's going 9.5 innings. Then tomorrow, 1 p.m., 8.5 innings. And then on Monday, February 10th, 3:30 p.m., they're supposed to go 4.5 innings. And that'll lead right into opening day and opening weekend. I'm really looking forward to it, guys. We'll have a lot to talk about the season. Again, we're going to go live every single week to talk baseball, solely dedicated to baseball. And I know that's got to be refreshing after not having any football now for a little bit here, and men's basketball not being great. The women are doing awesome. I saw they beat Georgia yesterday in Athens. Really big win for them to continue their success. But baseball is around the corner, y'all. So appreciate all of you guys tuning in. Again, if you're not already, go ahead and subscribe to GamecockCentral.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy it. Like and subscribe. And I will see you guys on Sunday Reset to break down what I saw in scrimmage action this weekend. Y'all be good. Have a great weekend. I'll see you guys next time.